Sometimes kids need to be corrected. It's part of our job as parents, albeit not my favorite part. But today I'm going to talk about how we as parents can give that correction in a way that it is more likely our kids will actually not only hear us, but actually listen. Hi, I'm Jamie Knapp, and this is the Inner Strength Parenting Podcast, where we talk about insights from the scriptures to help you love your life, live your mission, and raise kids who do the same. Today, we're going to be talking about Mosiah chapters 11 through 17. And whether you're using these to supplement your study with Come Follow Me, or you're just trying to strengthen yourself and your kids from the inside out, today I hope you find lots of insight, especially in regards to how to correct your kids and actually have them not just hear you, but listen. Today, we're going to be talking about the story of Abinadi. But before we jump into that, I want to share just a story I was thinking about from when I was little. I was actually in grade school and we were having inside recess. I grew up in Idaho, so it wasn't super uncommon for it to be too cold to go outside or too whatever, like the weather would get crazy. So, this is one day that we had recess that we had to stay inside. And while we were inside, all of the kids were in the classroom and we were all doing different activities. And there wasn't a teacher in the classroom. The teacher had probably left for a moment to, go use the restroom or do those things that teachers don't have enough time to do. And so we were just alone in the classroom. And while we were alone, I remember the classroom getting so crazy and kids were starting to do things that I knew they shouldn't do. And the volume was getting louder and louder and louder. And kids were pretty soon like writing on the board and just being crazy and laughing and teasing. And it was getting really out of control. Now, I, as a child, was one of those like obedient children. I had to do what was right and follow the rules. And so I knew what all of these people were doing wasn't right. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to tell them that they need to stop and they need to obey. And so I just said, hey guys, we need to be quiet. We're getting too loud. And no one listened. No one even paid attention. They just kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and then kept going. And I said, you guys, like, we're going to get in trouble. And they still like they didn't listen. And so finally I decided I would do what the teachers did, and I went over and I turned off the lights. And for just a second, they were scared and they looked over to see if a teacher turned off the lights. They saw that it was me, and they went right back to what they were doing. And I thought, "Ugh, why won't anyone listen to me?" And so a few minutes went by and I got really nervous because I knew we were going to get in trouble. And then all of a sudden the lights went off again. And a teacher came by and turned, and everyone, all the kids froze and looked again. And the teacher said, "Hey guys, you're out of control. You're too loud." And everyone calmed right down. And in that moment, I remember thinking, why will I listen to her? And the obvious answer was that she was the teacher and she was the one that could actually get them in trouble if they weren't obeying. She was the one that had authority. And in this story, a very similar thing happens. If we go to Mosiah 11, we learn that the people that are in the story are actually the people of Zenith that we talked about last week. So these people had learned that when Ammon came and he taught them about King Benjamin, they had learned to trust in the Lord. And because they had learned to trust in the Lord had delivered them from bondage and life was good. Well, then the kingdom passes to King Noah. Zenith is no longer king. It is now King Noah. And King Noah is not like his father. King Noah, we read in Mosiah chapter 11, verse 1, says he did not walk in the ways of his father. And in verse 2, he did not keep the commandments of God. He did walk after the desires of his own heart. So Noah, even though he was taught these things and he knew about God and he had been taught these things, he is choosing to not follow the words of his father. Now, I think for every parent, that's kind of our worst nightmare, that at some point our kids will decide, hey, I'm not going to believe what my parents taught me. And this is what is happening to King Zenith's child, to Noah. And to make it worse, Noah is taking his people with him. He actually gets rid of all of his father's righteous priests, and he gets priests of his own that will believe in Noah's lifestyle, that will support having concubines, that will support It says he was a wine bibber. He drank lots of wine, and he built elaborate palaces and buildings, and had all of these riches. He taxed the people a fifth part of all they had so that he could keep this lifestyle. And he surrounded himself with people that would support what he believed. I've noticed this happens in our society a lot. A lot of times when someone decides they don't want to follow certain commandments, they distance themselves from people who do and surround themselves with people who live the same lifestyle, because no one wants to feel guilty or feel like they're being judged, right? So if they don't believe that, they'll generally tend to separate themselves. So that's what Noah does. And he's living this life. Now, because he's no longer following the Lord is no longer protecting him. So what happens is the Lamanites start to attack again. And at first it's just in small numbers, and they're going out to people in the fields, and they're attacking them and killing them. Well, obviously Noah can't let this happen. And so he tries to send some men out to protect them, and it doesn't work. And so then he says, fine, I'll send the whole army. And he sends out the army, and they're able to push back the Lamanites. Now, what happens here is interesting. In chapter 11, verse 19, this is what the people say. They say, and now because of this great, or it says, this is what it says about the people. Because of this great victory, they were lifted up in the pride of their hearts, and they did boast in their own strength, saying that their 50 could stand against thousands of the Lamanites. And thus they did boast and delight in blood and the shedding of the blood of their brethren. And this because of the wickedness of their king and priests. So the people had come to the point where they're like, you know what? We don't even need God. We've got this. We can do this by ourselves. We could kill thousands. No problem. We are totally fine. So the Lord is not going to let this just happen. So he sends Abinadi to teach them about the wickedness of their ways, and to teach them about the gospel and try to help them return and repent. But they don't want to be told to repent. And so what they do is they actually bring Abinadi in to be questioned. They want to find what he did. In chapter 12, verse 19, it says that they brought him in that they might cross him, that they might have a reason to accuse him. So they're trying to find something. We got to get rid of this guy. We don't want him telling the people that we're wicked. That's not good, right? Not good for PR. So they want to get rid of Abinadi. They bring him in, they ask him all these questions, and it's not working. Not working. In fact, it gets to the point where they're really starting to get a little nervous. And so in chapter 13, he's teaching them, and all of a sudden Noah's like, okay, like, we're done with this. You need to slay him. He's mad. And as they go up to get Abinadi, he says in chapter 13, verse 3, touch me not, for God shall smite you if you lay your hands upon me. I have not delivered the message which the Lord sent me to deliver, neither have I told you that which he requested that I should tell. Therefore, God will not suffer that I shall be destroyed at this time. Now, that's not what they're expecting, makes them a little nervous. And Abinadi knows exactly why they're upset. He says, because I have told you the truth, you are angry with me. But why do they listen to him this time? Why do they listen? We find out in verse 6 why. It says, he spake with power and authority from God. Now, as I think back to that story of when I was in grade school, the reason my friends weren't listening to me is because they knew I didn't have authority. I had no authority or power over them, and there was no reason they needed to listen to me. And sometimes as parents, that happens a little bit as our kids get older. When they're little, they tend to just believe, and we're kind of all powerful and all knowing. But the older they get, they realize, hey, wait, I don't actually have to listen, and I don't actually have to do what mom and dad say. And then they learn that 2-letter word, no. You know that one? And they use it a lot when they're young. And then as they get to be teenagers, they use it more passive aggressively, right? Like they find ways to not obey without really saying no. They just don't do it, or they go around, or they do different ways. But all of it really is the same. It's a challenge of authority. And so there's different ways of dealing with that. You can make your kids obey, and you can do that. You can just have stricter consequences and enforce it more, and they will obey for a time. And then as soon as they can, they will rebel. That's what's been shown. You can be super permissive. You can let them do whatever they want. and then they will do whatever they want, or you can be somewhere in the middle where you have guidelines and you enforce those, but you do it without taking all of the power. Now, the key here, though, in all of this is that if you want your kids to listen to you, they have to sense that there's a reason they should. If you want your kids to listen to you, they have to sense that there is a reason that they should. And this is exactly what happened with Abinadi. He spake with power and authority from God. Now, I think about all of the bajillions of times I've corrected my kids, right? Or given them instruction or told them or gone off on my wisdom rants, right? Where I tell them all the things I know. And there are times they listen and there are times that they don't. And sometimes the more we talk, the more they tune us out. So how do we actually speak in a way that they listen? Well, I think the story of Abinadi is the real clue. Abinadi said, "Touch me not, because I have not delivered the message which the Lord sent me to deliver." This is not the first time that they tried to imprison Abinadi. This is not the first time that they got him. But this is the first time that the Lord doesn't let them touch him. And the reason is he's about to deliver a message from the Lord. And so as parents, I think that's super instructive. There are lots of times that we can talk in our own wisdom, and we can say what we think our kids need to know, and our kids don't listen. And then there are those times where we go to the Lord first and we seek him in prayer and say, "Hey, this is a concern I have. This is something I'm seeing. What should I do? What would you have me say?" And when we say those words, it's different. We speak with the power and authority of God, and our kids can feel the difference. Our kids can feel the difference. Now, look back into your past and you're going to see that this is true, because there are many, many, many times in your life that people have given you advice or counsel. Maybe it was a spouse, maybe it was a coworker, maybe it was a boss, maybe it was a friend. And they said the words and you said, "Huh," and then you just let it go and you didn't give it another thought. And then there are other times where someone said something to you and it resonated with your soul. And in that moment, you knew it was true for reasons you didn't even completely understand. You just knew it spoke to your soul, and you never forgot what they said. You never forgot what they said. I had a friend once come say something to me, and we had actually a long conversation, and I remember bits and parts of that conversation, but I was telling her about something that I had just actually this, like I was telling her that, I just feel like I'm supposed to support families and teach people and help them to raise kids in the gospel and things like this. And I said, "But I just don't know if I can. I just don't feel qualified to do that." And she looked at me and she said, "Jamie, if God put that into your heart, who are you to tell him you're not qualified?" And when she said that, it struck me in a way nothing else in that whole conversation did. And I knew that what she was saying was true and that it was inspired, that the message just wasn't just from her, it was from heaven, and that the message was from me. And because of that, I never forgot what she said. Now, the things we say to our kids are the same way. You're going to say so many things to your kids that they will never remember. But those things that you say that come from God, when you speak with power and authority from God, as did Abinadi, those are the things that will hit differently. They won't just hear them and brush them off. They will speak to their souls, and they will know that they are true. And even if they don't respond immediately, they're not going to forget. They're not going to forget. And I think that is one of the real golden nuggets here from Abinadi. So let's see what Abinadi does next. So he's like, "Okay, I've got this moment." And he starts where they are. Good parenting principle, right? Meet them where they are. He talks about the things they have taught the people, the law of Moses. He starts talking about all the commandments and the things that they have taught the people. Even if they're not living them, he knows that they know them. So he meets them where they are. And then he says, But there's actually more. There's actually more to this story. And in chapter 15, we learn, he talks about Isaiah. He goes through all these chapters and teaches them all about Isaiah. But then he says, I want you to understand something. And in 15, verse 1, he says, I would that you should understand that God himself shall come down among the children of men and shall redeem his people. So he starts to teach them the law of Moses is good. There's lots of important things. But what I want you to know and what heaven wants you to know today is that there's more. And the more is Jesus Christ, that he is going to come down upon his people, and then he's going to help them and he's going to save them. He is going to redeem them. And then as we move into chapter 16, Abinadi, after teaching about Jesus Christ and his role and his mission and what he will do, he actually begins to testify of what he knows to be true of Jesus Christ. And there's so much power there, so much power there. He says, the time shall come when all shall see the salvation of the Lord, when every nation, kindred, tongue, and people shall see eye to eye and shall confess before God that his judgments are just. I love that he is moving into this real state of testifying, of saying what he knows is true. And he goes through all of this, through teaching the priests, through testifying what he knows is true. And all of this time, he's not getting any positive response. In fact, as far as Abinadi is concerned, no one is listening. No one is listening. The Lord is just letting him, giving him the space to deliver the message. And then when he's done, then King Noah's like, okay, all right, I guess we can kill him now, right? and we realize that from Abinadi's perspective, no one listened. And sometimes as a parent, that's how it feels. Sometimes you feel like you're saying these things over and over again, and you wonder if anyone is even listening. But as we go into chapter 17, verse 2, we find out that somebody did. Abinadi finishes what he's saying, and king commands the priests that they should take him, put him to death. And so he's like being gathered, it's ready to go. And then in 17 verse 2, it says, but there was one among them whose name was Alma. He also being a descendant of Nephi. He was a young man, and he believed the words which Abinadi had spoken, for he knew concerning the iniquity which Abinadi had testified against them. Therefore he began to plead with the king that he should not be angry with Abinadi, but suffer that he might depart in peace. But the king was more wroth and caused that Alma should be cast out from among them, and sent his servants after them that he might slay him. So as far as Abinadi is concerned, no one listened, no one heard. But the truth is that this young priest, Alma, did hear. And we know that after Alma is cast out, that he goes into hiding to protect himself. And while he is in hiding, he writes the words of Abinadi. He writes the words that Abinadi had taught. And then he later, we're going to learn, goes and teaches so many people. And I think what is instructive here is that as a parent, we don't always know if our kids listen, and we don't always know what they remember. But what we can know is that if we will go to the Lord, if we will ask him to join us in our parenting journey, if we will take our concerns to the Lord and ask him for the next best step, and if we will courageously say those things that he puts into our hearts with love, then we can know that when we speak with power and authority from God. So even if we don't see all of the results, or we don't see our kids immediately respond, we can know that those words go to their hearts, and we can know that they hear more than we think they do. And then the second thing I think we can take is, one is obviously to go to Christ, to speak with the power and authority of God. But number two is to speak of Christ. That is the message that Abinadi shared. And that is the message that touched Alma's heart. That Christ had power to save even him, no matter what, in whatever situation, in whatever trial, and whatever obstacle, that Christ was always there ready to help. And I think that's the same message that we want to make sure our kids hear, that no matter what they're up against in life, no matter what they're struggling with, no matter what they're worried about, that Christ is always standing ready to help. And if they will let him, he can help them through whatever obstacles they face. And as we do those two steps, we can know that as we parent our kids, that we will be supported by all of heaven in helping them come to know who Christ truly is. I hope you enjoyed this message. If you did, be sure to subscribe so you can catch us next week. And until then, love your life, live your mission, and raise kids who do the same.